Hello, and welcome to Cinema Crash, where today we talk about everything a man can do wrong. Because we're talking about No Longer Human, the adaptation of Osamu Dazai's book from like 1948 by Mika Ninagawa. It's the end of the Mika Ninagawa series. We're also talking about Followers, which is a Netflix show where Netflix threw money at her and she made a show that nobody cares about. I'm not alone. With me is Carl. Hello, Carl.
Hello.
And yeah, so Ninagawa, if you're here, you maybe know we've been going through all of Mika Ninagawa's films because she's a cool director of Japanese movies, and now we're at No Longer Human for now, and then later we are also going to talk about Followers. Um, so I think I'll do the intro to No Longer Human because I just rewatched it yesterday.
Go
It
for it.
is a so it's not necessarily an adaptation of the book No Longer Human, and more like a mix between it and a biography of Osamu Dazai. They're also like No Longer Human is like a fictionalized biography. The book No Longer Human, the movie, is also a fictionalized biography of the person Osamu Dazai. Both are not like necessarily true to what happened, or like documentaries, but they are both about Dazai as a person, written by Dazai himself, who is famously a not very mentally well person. His life ended in suicide. I think he attempted suicide several times, even throughout his life, and that is very much reflected in the book and the movie. He cheats on his wife, he cheats on his mistress, he just kind of cheats on everyone. He's a very asshole person. Um, and Ninagawa actually, goes a bit more into, because it's Ninagawa, right? It's gonna be about women, so it's more about from like the perspective of the woman who Dazai entangles himself with. Uh, yeah. Anything to add, Carl?
No, I think that's a pretty good description. Dasai cheats on his wife, he cheats on his mistress. He does a lot of sex. He does a lot of talk about killing himself.
Hmm.
Um, and then he ends up dying in the end.
He does. Spoilers, but the man who killed himself dies in his biography.
Yeah, R.I.P. to Osamu Dazai.
Yep. Rip to a real one.
Yeah, Osamu Dazai is one of Japan's most famous authors, by
Yeah,
the way. For
absolutely.
anyone who is unaware.
He is definitely up there in like the top three or something. Uh, I mean, depending on the era that you look at, he's definitely number one. But yeah. So, what are we gonna talk about first?
Well, I guess let's just start with overall thoughts. What did you think about the movie, like as a whole?
I on rewatch, I really liked it.
Hmm.
When like preparing for this podcast, it was a bit like this was the one I was least excited to revisit for the podcast. But I think like watching it was really just like pleasant and really flowed well. Like it didn't feel like it was 2 hours long. Um, Everyone is super attractive as usual. Score is great, colors are great. I'm very interested in like just the subject matter. No Longer Human is one of my favorite books. At least when I read it several years ago. Um, yeah, the acting was good. Everyone was just very attractive and good at their job.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a well-made movie. Uh, Actors do their jobs very well. I guess for me, it's that I have no experience either with Dasai as a person or with anything that he has
Hmm.
written. My only experience with Osamu Dazai is Bungo Stray Dogs, which um, Well, I don't think it's a good representation.
Yeah, it's different for sure, for sure.
Yeah. But so like, um, as a person who doesn't know anything about Dasai, right? That makes for a different viewing experience.
Mm,
Uh, which a lot of time with these like fictional biographies, there are often things that maybe they do expect you to know beforehand.
mm,
Uh, and like obviously it's a big cultural icon in Japan as well, so that's not as big of an issue for them usually. But for me, as like a Swedish boy who only knows this guy as like a raging nihilist,
mm,
the viewing experience wasn't really like as great. I didn't know who the characters were, whether or not they had prior significance. You mentioned to me earlier that the author who shouts at him in the bar is also like a big Japanese author icon
mm,
who's pretty
yeah,
funny. Obviously, that is lost on me.
mm,
Any kind of name drops are lost on me. Um, but just as a directorial piece, as a movie, and as a fictionalized biography, I think it's a good watch. I think it's fun at times. I think it gives you some stuff to think about. I think it's a nice look as well into an era that, like, we mentioned this a bit when we were talking about Drunken Angel a couple months ago. But I really like this transitional period where you have this like Eastern attire mixed with Western attire.
mm, for sure.
Like
Yeah,
uh like there's scenes where people are in kimonos while other people are in suits and stuff. That's pretty neat.
yeah, yeah. That's
Visually, very nice movie.
yeah. The whole like transition is the whole thing of the Meiji era, right? When Japan opened its borders around the turn of the 20th century. And Dazai isn't a Meiji era writer. He's influenced by them. I think the Meiji era went until 1911, and Dazai was only born in 1909. So he's you know No Longer Human was released in 48, uh,
Hmm.
and I think like the other very popular book by him was in 25 maybe. So he's more like between the wars and past after the Second World War. But there's definitely the influences from the Meiji era still present in his writing.
Yeah. Um, and then like when they discuss his works, right? Like your critics talking about his prior books and stuff. Obviously, that means nothing to me
Mm.
because I haven't read them. I don't know what they're about. And maybe if I did know that, I would. It would give me a greater sense of understanding of what was going on, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, I do think that it's a shame that this is Nianagao's most recent work because I would much rather be talking about something uh, like from her brain,
Mm.
um, something that like a biography is kind of boring to end things on. I think as like a culmination.
Sure. I mean,
So luckily she has another movie coming out soon that we'll get to talk about.
yeah,
But
but that's
for
also
now,
an adaptation, right?
yeah. But I'd rather watch an adaptation than a movie about people who actually existed.
Yeah, fair, fair.
But yeah, shall we just like uh,
I mean,
out of it?
yeah, dive right into like some of the things we liked. So as we
Yeah,
mentioned, right, the acting was good, the colors were good, the soundtrack was good, the usual things Ninagawa does well. Let's just start with the colors, right? Um,
red.
so once again, we have like great use of the colors red and blue and everything. Personally, I think her use of colors is the best in this film. I do love the very like fashion magazine look of Helter Skelter and the neon look of Dinah, but I think the actual use to transfer meaning is best in No Longer Human. And what I mean by that is that there's three women Dazai interacts with, right? There's his wife in the and this is not just color, this is also set in the like classical Japanese house with the children and everything. Then there's his first mistress, who has this like very rose colored fancy western apartment, uh, or like I think it might even be a house. But and then the third one, which is the mistress with whom he actually commits suicide later. Whenever they are at her place, it is very dark and very blue. Like that's not a place you want to be at because you're gonna commit suicide at some point. With
Hmm.
how depressing just being at this place is. So right, we have this like you can always see what character this is about. All the three women have very different, you know, places they belong in.
It's a piece of visual storytelling as well, right?
Yeah,
Because, like you mentioned, the like dreary kind of darker lights. You mentioned that's like if you stay there, you're gonna commit suicide.
yeah,
You can read that the other way and say that it, had Dasai stayed with one of the other two women, perhaps he would have found a way out.
mm,
Perhaps that is the message being sent there. Perhaps had he been a faithful husband and trying to find some happiness in his role as a family man, or had he, um, lived with this very optimistic person who his first mistress turns out to be.
mm,
Maybe that could have impacted him as well, but he chooses to settle down with a woman seemingly even more intent on committing suicide than he is.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they just like he only like it does things with her, right? They meet because of suicide, basically. Like they meet.
Yeah,
That is the intent of their relationship in a way from the start. Um,
yeah, and the movie, as the movie lays it out, it's more of like a he didn't actually want to commit suicide,
mm,
or like he wasn't the active party in doing it. He was kind of trying to back out of it at the end, even.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that's she can say a lot with her use of colors, Inagawa.
Absolutely. We can really see that she's had like like what 15 years of experience almost between Sakuran and No Longer Human, where Sakuran was the film is red, and then he is blue when Kyoha is sad, right?
Hmm.
And now this goes a whole step further. Um,
Oh yeah, for sure. She's very overt in her use of colors as well, which like that's become a thing with her. She's very powerful. She doesn't really do subtlety
mm,
with her visual storytelling, which I can respect. There's also like all
absolutely.
of the Virgin Mary imagery
Mm,
with the first mistress,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then she ends up becoming, a single mother, uh, which like yeah, the illusion is there.
Mm, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, and then comparing No Longer Human to Helter Skelter, which there are some comparisons to be made in the protagonist. Also, just on a side note, that the actress who played Ririko, Erika Savagiri, is also in this film, being the first mistress. Um,
Hmm.
so there's just another, like, the auteur theory, which, advocates for, like, certain people being able to carry their own voice through in like all the films they do. One of those things that speaks for that is the auteur theory is a bit controversial, but one of the things that speaks for it is reusing the same like staff and cast, like getting like a repertoire of people you work with. And yeah, that's what this film does, right? Shunoguri, who plays Dazai, was in Sakuran. Erika Savagiri was in Helter Skelter and Dinah. Tatsuya Fujiwara, who just plays a side character here, was the um, what's his name, Bolero in Diner.
Bombero.
Bombero, that was his name,
Yeah.
right? So we've got the recurring people, but that was just an aside, right? We're not gonna go too much into auteur theory here.
No, it's more like a DiCaprio pointing at TV kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that guy.
No, so because when we talked about Helter Skelter, one of the big points was whether Ririko is portrayed as sympathetic or not, whether, we want her to be happy or not, uh, how it is portrayed in the film. And of course, No Longer Human is a film about an absolute asshole.
Yes.
Dazai is not a nice person, and so there's obviously the question of, are there changes to how she portrays Ririko in Helter Skelter, or is it the same kind of portrayal? How do you feel about that? What's your opinion?
I think it's a different beast. I think fundamentally it's a different situation. Um, Part of it has to do with the fact that this is a biographical work.
Hmm.
So the subtext is that actual people actually had to deal with this guy. Right? He actually cheated on his real wife, in front of her nose. He actually uh, semi plagiarized a woman's diary to write his own book. Uh, he actually was an alcoholic and was not there for his children, things like that.
Hmm.
Whereas Lilico, she does worse things. Uh, like fundamentally, she does more evil things. She throws acid in people's face and stuff.
Hmm.
But it is in a fictionalized world where even the characters who are wronged by her are like no one was actually hurt. They were only stepping stones for the story to move forward. And so the interpretation becomes different, I think. And then also a lot of the people who are uh, auxiliary cast in Helter Skelter, and we talked about this when we talked about the movie, they are shown to be complicit in some
Hmm.
way, or alluded to be complicit, alluded to have played a part in making her this way, either by enabling her or by uh, putting the pressure on her, which turned her into that. And something we talked about as well was that the entire world is complicit, all of society is complicit through this culture of like idolizing people and then immediately turning on them, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the read in No Longer Human is a lot more overt. This is like an asshole guy.
For sure.
A lot of scenes go out to show how what he does affects other people and the lack of responsibility he takes for it. But I don't think this movie is absent of it's not absent of reasons for him to be this way. You can for sure read a lot into the character, and that's what I did while watching the movie. And I think it invites the well, it's a biographical work. Of course, it invites you to get a deeper understanding for Dasai. But I think if you come away from this movie just going, this guy was an asshole, you've only really gotten like half the picture.
For sure. Yeah.
Especially for someone who, like, a lot of people deal with mental illness, and like the and I guess this is a part where you kind of need a deeper understanding of Dasai. Maybe the movie kind of goes out of its way to say it, but the fundamental idea of he realizes that he is an asshole and a dick, right? He titles his book "No Longer Human" um, because he feels he is disqualified from the title of human.
Yep.
So there is this realization, and I think that it is um, to just make him out to be an asshole is simplifying what is likely a more convoluted problem. Of course, a person who does not take responsibility for how their actions affect other people, that's not a good person. And that's a person who probably should take some responsibility. But to overlook external factors, such as, societal factors, how people behave, the pressures of like um, of the profession, as well as just brain chemistry and mental health, would be doing a disservice to, not to Dasai necessarily, but to like the portrayal of mental illness in general. Um, so yeah, like what? How do you feel about Dasai?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like I think a key difference to Ririko is that Ririko is the way she is because of the circumstances she is in, for sure. Um, you could pull her out of the model or the entertainment industry and she would recover, right? She,
Yeah.
like, of course, she is like not doing well while in there, but for Dazai, it's like more a problem in the person because of the mental illnesses and stuff, right? Like
Hmm.
he would just write himself deeper into his shit every time if you just, slapped him in the face and told him to get his shit together. And I think that's certainly a key difference. I didn't get the feeling in for the Helter Skelter episode. I mentioned how even if Ririko does everything wrong, the film never implies that she doesn't deserve happiness. It is always
Hmm.
like, no matter how bad you are, you deserve to be happy. I didn't get the feeling for this film as much. I felt it was very, well, Dazai fucked up and Dazai has to deal with fucking up, right? even
Yes.
even in just small things. I don't know if you noticed or remember this, but Yukio Mishima, the author who, you know, shouted at him in the bar and accused him of being like an asshole and a bad writer and, not being manly and not taking death seriously. He is introduced as a civil servant working at the tax office. And shortly after, Dazai gets a letter saying that he owes a lot of money in taxes, like a house worth of money. So I don't know if it did give me the feeling of, okay, he fucked with, like, he genuinely fucked with Mishima, and that's the retribution, right? He has
Oh
to
yeah.
pay for it, quite literally.
Yeah, that might be it.
Um, no, it might have also just been normal stuff. I don't know, but that's the feeling I got there. So right, it's more like, yeah, of course, Dazai has to pay for like cheating on his wife and stuff like that, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't
Because
get this. Sorry,
no, go on.
I didn't get the feeling that he deserves happiness nonetheless. More like, right, sure, it's circumstances, right? He's not well. He lives in a society where, like,
He
being sick
does. He
is,
does live in a society.
he surely does. Where, like, mental illness and anything, isn't as is like not accepted, not realized. And that's not his fault. But the things he does, I think the film is very much he's gonna pay for that, for the things he does. Uh,
Yeah. Like the sympathetic angle from Ninagawa, uh, like it's clear that she made this movie with more of a focus on the people who, like I said, had to deal with him, right? The
yeah,
people who were put through shit
I
by
mean,
him.
it's Ninagawa. It has to be about a woman, right?
Yeah, and like I think that's a nice angle to take. Um, Especially because this was a person who actually existed. It might be seen as disrespectful if she were to minimize his actions, right?
Yeah,
I think it is when you start to read more into it, when you start to pick up on things that, like, well, some of these problems are systematic in nature. Him drowning his shit in alcohol, like that's a societal issue. We see it in Drunken Angel as well, right?
Yeah.
It's a product of the time. We see that the people who he hangs around, the other authors or the people who read his books, like he's constantly either getting praise or getting like chastised for his poor writing.
Yep.
And he is a very egoistical person as well. Some would say narcissistical.
Mm.
Uh, I don't think there's a single scene in the entire movie where he considers someone else. And like narcissism as well, that's like a real illness, right?
Mm.
That's um, narcissists get a bad rap because often they are very annoying to have to deal with, oftentimes even harmful. But like the lack of sympathy or whatever, that's also an issue that you can't really help. Um, and I'm not making the case that like Dasai was good actually. If I knew Dasai in real life, I would beat the shit out of him, for sure. It's more of like I don't want to defend Dasai. I want to promote the idea of looking at systematic failures as well, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, back when I read the book, the reason it is one of my favorite books is because it resonated with me a lot. That
Hmm.
was during a darker time, right, when I was still very depressed. You know, I have tendencies that could put me on the autistic spectrum. Though I'm, you know, the question with the cutoff there is not something for this podcast. But so, like the whole nihilistic thing, um, I felt that like that disqualified as a human being, right? The inability to connect with other people, which some might say is like what makes us human, right? Empathy and things,
Yeah,
and even I mean, even heavily relating with what is written in that book at that time, he sure is an asshole. Uh,
for sure. And like I agree with you. Like I think a lot of people who have experienced mental health issues will be able to fundamentally connect to that idea.
mhm,
I am I am not a proper human being. I'm a dysfunctional human being. I am uh, something was made wrong in my brain, right?
mm,
I do not function as a human person is supposed to function. And this can come from all sorts of different areas. And like from that perspective, you get more of an understanding. Uh, and like studies show as well that like if you are dealing with a lot of shit, your uh, capability to feel empathy and to empathize with other people it decreases, right? Your um oh, what's the word for it? You don't consider like consequences in the
mm,
same way. Um, Obviously, like self harm related things, such as drinking yourself to death, such as making your own tuberculosis worse,
mm,
such as impregnating women simply because that seems to be the easier alternative. Um, these are all things that like you're still in control. You still carry the responsibility, but a person who is unwell will fundamentally behave different from a person who is not unwell.
mm,
And particularly in a society where these thoughts are not normalized, where like self care isn't a thing, where people do not like sit you down and talk to you and ask you how you're doing and help you with your thoughts. Right? Like these guys are joking and betting on when Dasai is actually gonna kill himself.
yeah,
And you know, that's fucked up. That's an incredibly messed up place to be in. And then also like he is in particular situations that he can't really get out of. He is married to his wife, and you know, I don't know how it was in Japan, but like divorce has historically been a very difficult thing to do if
mm,
you were to be unhappy. um, he has children, which you know it's very difficult to stop being a parent. um, and society expects you to reproduce as well. And also, just like, it can be argued whether it's the depression or whatever, but he appears to have non-monogamous, uh borderline hedonistic tendencies, right?
Hmm.
Which is something that can be explored nowadays, but for sure could not be explored back then. Which could only contribute to that idea of I am wrong. I am not a proper human being. I do not feel attraction simply to one person. Uh, Perhaps he was a romantic,
Hmm.
entirely possible. And what he considered to be love was simply misplaced feelings of want. It's an interesting character to study.
For sure. Yeah. It's very complex in just, yeah, being a good portrayal of like mental illness in that way.
Yeah. And the guy who plays Dasai as well, he's really good.
I love Shunoguri. Not
Yeah,
just that he's really attractive, but he's also a good actor.
yeah. Even if he was ugly, he would be a good actor.
It's just good that he's also very attractive.
Really putting his best foot forward in the role. I wonder what it's like to be asked to play Osamu Dazai. Like, do you think it's an honor, or do you think it's like, really, this guy?
I mean, I think it's a name with enough recognition that as like a Japanese person, that's a thing of prestige.
Yeah, probably.
It's not like being a German and being asked to play Hitler properly.
uh, yeah. No, but and then also, like, he talks a lot about committing suicide, but he doesn't actually do it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which in many ways is a sort of cry for help, right?
for sure. Yeah,
It's these thoughts are intrusive, but I don't actually want to do it kind of deal. Which the movie's interpretation is that he doesn't actually really want to do it.
yeah.
He's more murdered than than KYSing, but
he's
there's no
he.
way to say for sure how the real life counterpart was.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Dazai would pop off on Twitter nowadays.
Oh, for
Uh,
sure.
he would be popping off, arguing and like making jokes about suicide, um, stealing tweets from like e-girls. Um,
Dasai would be a menace online.
uh, yeah, let's talk about a few more like standout moments from the film, like specifically like images and thing, because Ninagawa is good at images, right? Before that, we talked a bit more about before the recording. You mentioned the scene when he actually leaves his family.
Hmm.
When the Well, no, he doesn't actually leave them yet. I think he returns later. But when I guess the wife realizes that, yeah, he's not like coming back
Yeah,
to the family, um, and the children who are like obviously have no understanding of what that means, being like what maybe one of them is newborn child, the oldest one is like maybe 4 or 5, if at
yeah,
all. um, right, like this contrast to them just playing around while the mom is having a bit of a moment.
yeah, yeah. That was an incredibly powerful scene to me. Some great acting. As an aside, I think the actor that they got to play his youngest child is like the cutest child actor I've seen in my entire life. But yeah, like this scene of the his wife, right, who's had to deal with all this shit, who's been with him throughout this entire thing, and who's had this like idea of he is an author first, and he's a great author, he's a fantastic author, and whatever he needs to do to create his art, like whatever.
Mm.
That was my read. Like, if he needs to fuck 100 women, I am the dutiful wife or whatever.
I think
And
there's also like that because I mean shortly before that, right, she has that confrontation where she tells him like if you need to destroy everything to make masterpiece, then go do it.
Mm,
uh right, there's like she just understands Dazai better than him, right?
yeah, and there is like this underlying theme of like art through suffering as well,
For sure, yeah.
which like the suffering artist, like that's a thing you see everywhere. Um, I see a lot of similarities between like Dasai, and of course I'm going to say this because I read Metamorphosis in high school, but between Dasai and Franz Kafka. Kafka was also famously extremely depressed all the time,
Mm,
like writing weird letters to admirers and then like name calling them and all sorts of shit. But to return to the scene in question, this scene of like the mother being on her own, and it's such a powerful performance because it is simultaneously incredibly sad,
mm.
but also she is free.
Yeah, it's very cathartic, right?
Yeah, and it's like this scene of she has to like, and the children don't understand. They don't understand why she's crying, and she is crying, but she's also playing with her children and holding them tightly, and it's this like they're all she has,
Mm,
and like Ninagawa, raging feminist Ninagawa. I think this scene is important in that way to show like the strength
for sure, yeah.
of a woman, of a mother.
Yeah, I mean, right, on the other hand, we've got the first mistress who
Yes,
has a child,
I love that character.
and she's just like, in a way, so petty, right? Like, she's a completely different breed of woman, uh almost delusional in that way, right? um Being about like her importance for the book, and then later writing a book about the book,
Hmm.
about the setting sun, which is the other famous Dazai book. So yeah, we've definitely got like the difference here, and like for sure the strength a woman, a wife, can have,
Yeah,
even as she, goes against her own happiness in that way, right? Because she basically broke up with Dazai, so Dazai could write
yeah.
the book he needs to write.
It's like it makes him out as a very pathetic character, right? Because
Mm,
he couldn't even be uh strong enough to tell his wife that like I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to take care of our children. She is the one who has to tell him that,
mm,
which like unfortunately is something that happens a lot in society, I guess. Deadbeat fathers is a common thing,
mm,
more common than it should be. And then also just like I guess the progressiveness of his first mistress as like a person who uh like doesn't really believe in marriage and true love or whatever. She wants a child, and it's like doesn't really matter if the father is in the picture.
mm,
Which, like, yeah, go girl, do that. And then her brother is just like uh, a cool guy. I like this hairstyle.
mm. I do think this film is a bit weird in how allo cis het this film is, right? Like, you know, parenthood is a woman's greatest joy, is like
Hmm.
kind of what the film is trying to sell. Which, talking about followers in a bit, well, like, this is definitely something that Inagawa thinks about, like, women. And I'm not gonna argue with her because she knows better than me what it's like. But it felt a bit weird how like this film was like, you know, not acknowledging that not every woman wants to be like, wants like, it was really all women need in life is love, or that's the biggest thing they need, which I found a bit sketchy, right? Because like,
Yeah,
you don't, it felt like it was trying to be universal, which
yeah.
it's not.
'Cause it's both of his mistresses are asking him for a child, right?
Mm,
Which I think there's a couple different reads of it. Because I think when you take the time period into account, having a child is like what is expected of you.
Mm,
And so I think for this movie, more than I guess Followers, which is set right now, I kind of understand the whole having a child as an aspect, and also because I assume this is what happened in real life as well.
mm,
Um, like in the 40s, deciding that I am going to raise a child on my own, uh, that's a progressive stance. Nowadays, it's still progressive, but not in the same way. And I think that the movie also makes it out that the second mistress only wants a child as like a some sort of proof of love,
mm.
some sort of legally binding, we have to commit suicide together kind of deal.
Yeah, for sure.
But I agree with what you're saying that it would be nice if not every female character in the movie was relegated to
Yeah,
mother or wants to be a mother.
right. Like that's the thing is just that like in other films, like even Followers, which is all very much about like pregnancy and parenthood. It's not that it's a specific character for whom this is so immensely important, right? And here
Hmm.
in No Longer Human, it feels like it's every character. Um,
Yeah.
and that's
Childbirth becomes a theme of the movie, the entire
yeah.
movie.
Um, and if I had only seen No Longer Human, I would get the feeling that Nina Gava is a very conservative woman.
Hmm.
And I know she isn't necessarily, like, at least she does accept queer people existing.
Yeah.
um though also, like, of course, the gay men are always just stereotypically you know cosmeticians,
Yeah.
and assistants to, like, women. um but and then but Helter Skelter has a bit, like, and Followers does. And so this film just feels weird, like it doesn't particularly fit in. Whether she, like, got rid of, like, all those ideas she would have because it's just not what happened in real life, or if there were some other conscious decisions. It felt a bit weird.
Yeah. Maybe she was going through a phase. Maybe
Maybe
she was going through her I want to be a mother phase. Um, I
might
mean,
be.
like, I'm not qualified to speak on a lot of things, but I do anyway. And like even in Western countries, right? You can find some extremely feminist people who still have like these conservative
Mm,
views when it comes to children, or like not necessarily even as a pushing your agenda kind of thing, but as
mm.
like this is an important aspect of being a woman to me.
Yeah.
uh, Many people have that view of feminism. I think we're moving away from that as
I
like.
mean, it depends, right? There's, like, always different ways of feminism, and
Hmm.
it alternates between embracing womanhood and, like, making this your own, and rejecting it, as in we don't want to be just woman. We can also be, whatever the fuck we want. Um,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say as
yeah,
well. You
it
put
it
it a lot
always
better.
yeah it always alternates, right? Like
Yeah.
from the
The
when
the idea of feminism as embracing your femininity
yeah
would go hand in hand, I think, with having a child,
yeah.
with or without a man.
No, for sure. Yeah, there's, I mean, Helter Skelter is a lot about that because it is about the model industry.
Hmm.
Right. Sakuran is, of course, also about that because, it's about Kiyoha, finding her place in the brothel. Right. It's just,
Yeah.
making sex her own in a way.
Yeah. Uh, I don't like, again, I'm not uh I shouldn't be speaking about things I don't understand, but like culturally Japan is a bit more conservative
Mm,
than many other countries. Maybe they have like Maybe it's a cultural thing, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe it's a societal thing. Maybe it's she decided it as a theme for this movie. Maybe she was just going through some shit.
Yeah,
But yeah, I agree with what you're saying that it would be nice if feminism was expressed in a more varied uh,
yeah.
set of ways.
I think she definitely went through a phase because, like, even Dinah, right, the friend kiss at the end, that
Yeah,
we both don't like it, right? Um,
Ninagawa was really
so-
horny for a
yeah,
while.
yeah, and then no longer human and followers. It's more of a topic again, and I hope in xxxHolic it is absolutely no topic, but we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Anything else you want to talk about from of the movie? Yeah.
Well, are there any other scenes that we really like? There's the you mentioned you had some stuff to say about
Right.
one scene in particular where Osamu Dazai is puking up blood
Right.
in a very snowy uh, village street.
Yeah, exactly. So he's coughing up blood because of tuberculosis, and it's red splatter on a white background, and he's like, "Oh, this just looks just like the Japanese flag," which I feel like in this movie it was a bit, just whatever. It didn't have like any thematic meaning, but it does, of course, very heavily remind anyone who knows to female prisoner 701 Scorpion. No, female prisoner Scorpion 701, something like that. The 1970 71 like exploitation, very feminist film about a woman who gets raped and then accused for some crime by uh, by her boyfriend and the man who is the man who raped her, and gets put in prison. And she swears revenge and gets out of prison and kills all the men who did her wrong.
Hmm.
The scene of her being raped is it's not shown, right? But the way it is shown and implied that she is raped is that we see like we don't see her hymen being broken, but we see on a white bed sheet a red, like, you know spot, like, getting bigger,
Mm.
which it's like a perfectly circular red spot on a white sheet. It's just like, you know immediate idea of the Japanese flag, and the idea that Japan as a nation is just built on the blood and suffering of women.
Hmm.
And that's what the film goes a bit more. I don't know. I remember if it was in the first one where she later stabs that man, also against a bed sheet or something like that. And then we have the same, you see the sheet, which I think was hanging out to dry. You see it from the back, and, again, the red spot forming where she stabbed him and splattering onto the sheet. So I don't know if it's supposed to be a reference to this, like, very feminist Japanese film, but
It probably is.
I wanted to mention that film because it's a cool film, and it's such a cool, like, metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the metaphor could work in this film as well,
Mm.
but there's not the same focus on
Y-
society,
Yeah,
right? Like I
exactly.
mentioned it a bit when we were talking about Dasai, but we also mentioned that the movie doesn't really go out of its way
Yeah,
to really dissect Dasai from a lot of angles. That's kind of left up to us as the viewers.
yeah. I feel like it's probably more like in Helter Skelter, right? Like one of the last scenes where Ririko stabs out her eye, and
Hmm.
you have the same. She's lying on a white background in a white dress, and blood flowing down from her eye. Right, just
Yeah,
a red on white looks good.
yeah, yeah, and the scene does look good, uh,
Yeah, yeah, for
for
sure.
sure.
You have the different white flowers then raining from the sky.
Yeah,
Very ephemeral.
yeah, it's a strong scene as well. Uh, yeah, it's tough to watch when he is choking.
Hmm. Yeah.
Actor does a really good job at portraying it, but it's difficult because it's so drawn out as well.
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Uh, yeah, it's like I guess that's like I don't know. It's one of the scenes where you could kind of sympathize with Dasai because it's the scene where he's more or less entirely on his own, and he's also like literally dying, and he's yelling at Bansai as like a joke.
yeah.
It's like well, isn't this ironic kind of thing.
Yep.
Someone could probably say something about that scene, but yeah, it's mostly nice to look at, I think.
Yeah, I mean the idea of like blood on white background is as like Japan is probably something fairly common. Um,
Likely, yeah.
but yeah, it's a cool scene. As you said, it's just very painful to watch as he breaks down and like he himself also realizes that this is the end.
hmm I think I think this movie is interesting from the angle of like love. Um, it's obviously a theme in the movie, and it seems to be skeptical towards it. I think
Mm,
you have these scenes. We already mentioned the mother finding peace within just like being a mother to her children, regardless of whether Dasa is there or not. You have the scene of his first mistress who just like is chill with being a single mom,
mm,
and likely raising them alongside her brother. And then like it almost as if to make fun of the trope of like a tragic love, right? Romeo and Juliet type love. You have the mistress who Dasai ultimately dies with, and they are tied together by this like thread of love as
mm.
they die. But the death itself is not beautiful and it's not an expression of love. It is simply two unhealthy people who cease to be.
Yeah, I was fairly disappointed that because there's like them dying is what the film starts with and ends with.
Yeah,
And usually, what Ninagawa does is like this like thematical connection, right? Um, right with the goldfish, with like the main symbol, with the mirrors in Helter Skelter. What Dinah had the whole like Mexico thing, the like escaping from society you're unhappy with, and I'm not sure whether what No Longer Human, whether that like works in the same way, or it was just the like calling forward to the ending by doing the beginning.
yeah. I didn't read it as more than like just an in media res start.
Yeah, I'm also like
Um,
I'm like not entirely sure if that was even supposed to be the same suicide.
yeah, because he survives the first one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He
Like
swims to shore.
I think he also did commit several suicides in his life.
Uh huh.
Um, and he does mention, like, he tells a story of, like, yeah, this woman he tried to commit suicide with, but then halfway through she called out another name. Right.
Right.
So it was like, the not entirely like the going forward, but obviously very similar connections. It basically looks like the same scene. It was most
Yeah.
definitely filmed at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Anything else you feel like talking about with this movie?
No, I think we'll like do like we can everything else will be said at the very end when we just quickly recap how we feel about Ninagawa.
Yeah.
So let's get into followers. Her
Sure.
2020 Netflix show, I think. 9 episodes, like 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes per episode.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't watch all of it because
Nope.
that's a lot of time. We are only going to talk about like the initial 2 episodes. I've seen a bit more, but you know, and we're not going to spend too much time on this. we just didn't want to make an extra episode for followers because movies are cooler. Uh, and it's good for, like, just driving home what Ninagawa does.
Yeah, well, it's not called Netflix crash, you know?
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about a single film that is on Netflix yet.
Well, it depends on what country you're in, I guess.
Maybe. Uh,
Maybe.
so, Followers is a show about, once again,
Instagram.
Instagram. It's about the entertainment industry. We mainly follow two women. Their stories only partially intersect. The main character, the real protagonist, is an aspiring actress who is down on her luck and can't get through in, well, presumably Tokyo, very, very surely Tokyo. Um, so she is just kind of struggling from gig to gig and mostly just plays corpses. So she and her, like, friends who are in similar situations, and then the other character, the other protagonist, is a successful photographer, very clearly a stand-in for Ninagawa's own experiences to a certain degree. It's very much implied that the film takes place around real time, around, like, probably the late 2010s. It's heavily applied that Liminara is her name, that she started during the, like, 90s, where Ninagawa also found her start as a photographer and then rose to become one of the most successful Japanese commercial photographers. Same goes for Liminara. And she wants a child. So, we're connecting against that topic of childbirth. She doesn't have a husband, though, or a boyfriend. She has a lot of work. So it's kind of her struggles to, balance the things and, get someone to fuck her so good that she gets pregnant.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. Some of us more, some of us less. Okay, so, and then they intersect shortly by Liminara's, randomly, like, making a photo of Natsume, who is the actress, and, just capturing her energy, and then posting it on Instagram, and suddenly Natsume becomes internet famous.
Yeah.
And then shenanigans ensue. Mostly, it gets to her head, but that's, for later. Um, yeah. So, how did you feel about those two episodes of Followers you watched?
It's pretty fun. I think it's pretty fun. Uh, there's like it's nice to just chill with a cast, having interesting like hangouts. I guess you got the scenes with like the photographer and her friend group, and they're just like swiping on Tinder and shit.
Mm,
It's fun to watch. Um, it's not really more than that, right? Like I can see a lot of Ninagawa stuff peering through. Obviously, photography is likely something that's very close to her. You mentioned the possibility of one of the main characters being a stand-in for her.
mm,
Um, I think it's interesting that it ties back to subjects discussed in Helter Skelter, which is one of Ninagawa's previous works, from like a different angle, I guess, at least so far. But I don't think it's a lot more than that. It
mm.
feels like just a show, a drama show.
Yeah, I think it probably does more with that later. I'm very excited to eventually finish it. But I think, like, for sure, what is most noticeable about, like, this being an Inagawa show, once again, we've got a lot of, like, returning cast, right? Erika Savajiri, who plays Ririko, is also in this show as herself. They're actually like, oh, look, it's Erika Savajiri,
Yeah,
uh, which is funny. Um, there's music by Daoko, who I feel I've mentioned as fitting very well to the Ninagawa aesthetic, and then Daoko actually also has a acting role in Holic, in her newest film. Um, but most notable, watching the series feels like flipping through a fashion magazine. In like, you have so many different cool outfits, you have so many like colorful, uh, just shots of places that
Yeah.
you're sitting in like the doctor's waiting room and just you're randomly flipping through a magazine, and you're probably watching followers at that very moment. And I like that. I think, right, it's not as like deliberate as No Longer Human in its use of color, or like Helter Skelter, but it's a very just pleasant to watch in that regard.
Yeah. It's a kind of thing that Ninagawa hasn't done before as well, which
Mm,
is fun.
yeah,
Um, it's fun that there's like it's pretty progressive. There's like a lesbian character
yeah.
who
I love
she do be fucking.
I love her.
A
She's
lot of people do be fucking in this one. There is very gay coded guy as
no,
well.
he is gay. He's
Oh, okay, he is.
yeah,
Yeah, uh, yeah, he is very gay, and he's pretty cool.
yeah, for sure. Like, he's obviously very stereotypically gay, right? He's very effeminate,
Hmm.
being the assistant to Lee Minara. And then also there's like later, they get the idea that if if the photographer only needs DNA, right, she just needs sperm, why not use her best friend even though he's gay, right? And he's like, he doesn't do that.
Yeah.
uh he's very right, he's very stereotypically gay. um well, a more nuanced gay the portrayal might also be like, yeah, you know confident enough to not care. I love the way they handled the lesbian, the best friend of the actress.
Hmm.
She is just a very nice character. She gets a bit more focus later on.
Yeah, I think that's like the upside of her getting to do a longer series like
Yeah,
this is she can explore her character writing a bit more
for sure, for sure. It's
with an
also
entire cast.
very notable. This is her first entirely original work, right?
Oh yeah, that's
And
true as well.
her only in that way. I don't actually know if she actually wrote the show. Oh, I have to check that real quick. She is credited as one of the writers. So yeah, I mean, obviously, right? Because like,
Yeah,
again, there's a stand-in for her, basically.
yeah. I think this series as well it contributes to my like theory of Nina Gao's feminism as like a very distinct kind of feminism, I guess, because what's portrayed in this is like very much the girl boss idea of being a feminist, right? Like a woman who doesn't need a man,
Yeah, for sure.
which like that's progressive, but it's also something that uh like it's a kind of feminism that's often like kind of made fun of in a way over here. Um for being outdated sometimes or for not being broad enough, I guess. And again, like cultural differences between over here and over there. I can't say anything about how they affect things. Uh, but like I guess it's like boomer feminism, right? Girl boss feminism.
Mm,
Um, she's not entirely woke because if she were entirely woke, she'd be like, no, corporations are a sham. Actually, the only way to be a true feminist is to be completely anarchist and live in a house in the woods.
for sure, the dream.
The dream.
Um,
But yeah, no, it's fun as well. Like seeing all these middle-aged women talking about how they don't need a man and they would rather have a wife to cook and clean back home.
yeah. Um, yeah, and like there's probably not much more to say about followers specifically, right? We did just want to like cut into shortly.
Yeah,
Uh,
we have seen it. We have seen parts of it.
Yeah,
I'll finish it at some point,
yeah. I'm,
probably.
I was always very confused that I don't think I have ever had like one person, but we don't talk about that person. The person that's the person from whom I know about Ninagawa at all, right? That's the only person who has ever acknowledged the existence of this show that I know of, which I
Yeah,
find weird that like, it's a Netflix show. It's like worldwide available on Netflix and nobody acknowledged that it exists.
yeah. It it's not that successful, right?
Yeah. Which is
It's a
good because
shame.
they're not gonna make a second season, and I hate when they make a second season.
That is true, but it is a shame because like it's a fun show. Like there's so much worse things you could be watching.
Yeah.
I'd rather watch this than the new season of Stranger Things.
Um,
Uh, it's progressive as well, which is nice to see, right?
it's
Uh,
topical, right? The like social media
uh-huh.
lifestyle.
Yeah, it handles some fun themes.
Mm.
It's Ninagawa, so obviously it's really cool to look at. Extremely nice to look at, oftentimes. There haven't been any insane shots so far, but they're probably coming.
Yep,
Characters look fun. There's uh, there's like fashion stuff that's pretty
for
cool.
sure. Yeah.
It is feminist, right? It's cool in that way.
Yep, for sure, for sure. Yeah, but to cap off our Ninagawa series, I once again want to talk about Ninagawa-isms,
Yes.
right? Just so let us to recap what is a Ninagawa film. So it's feminist for sure, right?
Yeah.
It's feminist in a very, yeah, as you mentioned with followers, right? Women don't necessarily need men, right? But also embracing their own femininity, embracing sex and stuff, embracing their identity as women in that way. Feminism, right? It
Yes.
it is nonetheless a very patriarchal society in which she sets her films usually. The people in power are always men in a way, to a certain degree at least. Yeah, even in followers, right? Like uh, Natsume, her boss at the like talent agency, is a man,
Yeah.
which she struggles from that. Um, of course, there's a use of colors as if this was like some magazine. Very bright colors, very different colors, colors like, you know, um, uh, colors command the tone and atmosphere of the scene they're in.
Yeah.
I think what feeds into that whole patriarchy thing, which we don't talk that much about yet, is the that it's always set in a very hostile world, right? So Sakuran is obviously also very hostile towards Kyoha. She isn't free. Helter Skelter is, of course, like extremely hostile, right? It's like basically you always have to pay attention or you're gonna get eaten. Dinah, the presence of death is always there. Um, no longer human, same, right? Like Dazai doesn't really fit into that world due to his mental illnesses and stuff, and followers then also, you know, it doesn't feel like the characters are all that comfortable in the world, at least not so many, the actress.
Yeah.
And because we did not script this part, have I forgotten anything? Do you have any more ideas for like Ninagawa isms?
Lots of fucking.
Lots of fucking. There's so much
Yeah.
sex. Sex.
No fucking in diner, but
Their friend kisses. Same difference.
yeah, that's
Um,
fucked up is what it is.
yeah, cherry
Um
blossoms.
Cherry blossoms for sure.
Generally, it's all almost all adaptations. Um,
Yeah, open on a monologue is a common
yeah,
one.
and like thematical connection between the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
Um, she does also always add elements to her adaptations, right? We've talked about this with like Helter Skelter, that or like Sakura and that the goldfish were like entirely new. That in Dinah, the whole Mexico thing was added in a way.
Yeah, she doesn't have ass things.
Yeah.
Um, did we say progressive in terms of like LGBT stuff? I guess that's not in all of her movies, so
Yeah,
maybe it's not quite an ism, but she has a progressive vibe to her.
sure, for sure. A very like close to actual reality vibe in that way, right?
Yeah,
You can see that, she's a person who actually lives in the 2010s and 2020s and works in this space and feeds that
yes.
into her work.
Yeah. I like, I don't know. Uh, you talk almost every episode about like a woman on her own cannot change society, and I
Mm,
think that's like a cornerstone of the whole thing. That like,
yeah,
yes, they are feminist, yes, they are progressive, but in a very grounded way.
yeah, that's, that feeds on the whole patriarchal, hostile world.
Yes, feminism in these movies is being a single mother. Feminism in these movies is um, having a well-paying job as a woman.
Mm,
It's not utopia. It is very grounded in that way.
yep, that's very interesting when we think about what her next movie is, which is not grounded in reality at all.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, do you have any Ninagawa-isms to add?
No, I think we've gotten them all. Those are the big ones.
Okay, because then, let's shortly talk about expectations for xxxHolic. Her,
I have none. I
yeah,
haven't
that's
dabbled in the source material.
okay. Yeah, so it's based on the manga by Clamp, the infamously famous mangaka group of like 4 or 5 women who have written a lot of things, from Cardcaptor Sakura to Tsubasa Chronicle to Chobit to also xxxHolic. It's interesting because it's a matriarchal society. A high school student is thrown into like a fantastical world and has to work for a woman. Um, and then, fantasy stuff ensues.
Hmm.
So that's interesting. I'm almost disappointed then that like not as many extremely attractive actors return. I think from the promotional material they are attractive, but yeah, the film looks very colorful again, very much the color red. Uh, Clamp themselves already use a lot of like flower image, and I think that will continue into this adaptation. The adaptation is also not popular by people who have seen it. Apparently, it's not a good film. I'm very excited.
Well, I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure I will love it. So yeah, we'll talk about that when it's out for us to watch.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'm interested to see how she plays around with the matriarchal society in particular.
Yeah,
I think one direction you could go. Well, one direction is that it doesn't matter. You just
actually, One
adapt
Di-
it how it is.
One Direction is a band, but yes.
Yes. One direction is like, and I guess this also plays into what kind of feminist is Ninagawa. One direction would be it's a matriarchal world, so no problems, right?
Hmm.
If we just get rid of all the men, then things will work themselves out. And then the other direction you could go is that, yeah, even though it's matriarchal, we still have the same issues because they are societal in nature,
Hmm.
perhaps even capitalist in nature, if we want to go full on woke Ninagawa.
Yep.
But
Um,
I think the most likely is that it will not come up all that much.
I mean, I think it should, because the Yuko, the woman who is actually in charge, she is a very, from what I've read of Holic, she's a very forceful person, right?
Okay.
And the protagonist, whose name I don't actually remember, is a very effeminate person. He's very like the like weakish, shy, not necessarily shy, but right, like a fairly passive male character.
Oh
Um,
well, maybe it will be a big thing then.
yeah, maybe.
Uh, to show that like, well, if women were in charge, things would be the same, but men would be the expected to be meek and docile and submissive and whatever.
Mm.
Um, it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited. I've heard about xxxHolic. I've never engaged with it. Might as well engage with it in the weirdest way possible.
It's also just, I don't want to go too deep into this, but around the time that manga was serialized, was released, Clamp also wrote Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle, which is basically like a Clamp best of, right? It like spans the different Clamp universes in a way.
Okay,
And
it's their Dark Towers.
sure, um, whatever that means. Uh, but these two series are also interlinked in that they canonically happen around the same time. And in between volumes of Tsubasa Chronicle, you are supposed to read volumes of Holic,
Oh,
because like the characters also appear in Chronicle, right? They in Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle they jump through worlds, and uh, the first one, and one that basically enables that, is the world of xxxHolic. And then the end of Reservoir Chronicle is also like references things that happen in Holic, but things I have not read because I've not read that manga that far. But I've read all of Reservoir Chronicle, so it's gonna just be interesting to see if anything makes sense. Because I love Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle. That's like one of those manga that it's just peak shonen for me.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm going. I'm just very excited for Clamp stuff. I also love.
Yeah.
Well, I don't love, but I like Cardcaptor Sakura and stuff.
She has her job cut out for her,
Yeah,
Ninagawa. I'm hearing.
there's man. She's just been like more and more exciting. I learned about Ninagawa around the time Dinah was releasing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then after that, it was like, okay, yeah, she's gonna, make a film about Dazai, a film named after one of my favorite books. I'm very excited for this. She's making a Netflix show about like Tokyo
Instagram.
lifestyle and Instagram and like feminism. I'm very excited for that. And then
Yeah.
she adapts the Clamp manga, which I'm very excited for. Um, Also, Daoko is in those, and that's one of my favorite musicians.
Yeah, she's just reading your browser history.
Yeah, that's but yeah, that's for now. This will be the end of the Ninagawa podcast series.
Yeah. How have you enjoyed it?
I really like revisiting these films. Um, not all of them I liked more than on the first time. I think Helter Skelter and Dinah suffered a bit from watching them again, but
Mm-hmm.
just getting a bit of a clearer image of this director that I've also already written a term paper on, of course. It was very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I
What?
agree. It's been a lot of fun. It's I like Ninagawa. I love a visually distinct director,
Yeah.
and she is one for sure. I think she's in an important spot, being that she is progressive and feminist and all of that. Um, like not all of her movies are bangers. Diner is a banger.
Mhm.
Sakuran, like points for trying, but kinda mid. Um, like were I to rank the movies, it would probably be like Diner and Helter Skelter tied at the top,
Mm.
and then yeah, and then like No Longer Human, and then Sakuran, and then followers off to the side somewhere
Yeah.
in Netflix jail. Uh, I'm really excited to see where her career goes.
Yep.
Holic is coming out now. Maybe maybe one day we'll get to see an original movie from her.
Maybe.
That would be really cool. Oh.
Yep. Um. Well, let's cap it off here then, right?
Yeah, this has been the Ninagawa four-parter deep dive. We will talk more about Ninagawa once Holic comes out and gets subbed and everything. But until then, we will go back to just doing other stuff. We have some thoughts in the works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we are going on vacation for a bit. We'll try and get episodes out in the meantime, but we'll have to see how that goes. Ah, anything that you want to shout out or anything, Aska?
Um. I'm not on Twitter anymore, so not that, but do follow Carl on Twitter.
Do follow me on Twitter. I'm at yaboy Burke. I also recently went on Ali's podcast again
Oh
to
yeah,
talk about some horror movies.
exactly. That's
Uh, if we're
well.
lucky, those episodes will be out now.
Yeah.
X's Cinema Club, you can listen to them wherever you're listening to this one, except for YouTube.
That's just Anchor and Spotify, which I connected then. But there
Yeah,
will be links in the description, of course, because do listen to our friend Ali at ECC.
ECC. Other than that, feel free to go back and listen to the rest of our stuff. If you haven't listened to the other Ninagawa episodes, do so. If you joined us with the Ninagawa episodes, please listen to our other stuff. We have some stuff like deep dive into Japanese film history. I've done a horror episode with Ali. We probably have another horror episode out with Ali by the time this releases.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on which order we do it. There's a lot of funky stuff there. And as always, you can stay tuned and we will produce even more of that funky stuff.
Yeah.
But I think we'll leave it off there. So thank you once again for listening to our podcast. I've been Carl and my co host has been Aska.
Bye bye. Thanks for listening.